Good evening, this is Jason Lightoller from Woodside, and tonight I'm going to show you how to make this classic men's tank top, or a vest, or a pullover, or a slip. I've never really worked out which is the correct term. In the UK we tend to use tank top, but sometimes it's classed as a formal vest. Anyway, it's a classic timeless design. It's been in vogue for many years, and it will stay in vogue for many years. I made this on a standard gauge knitting machine, and I've used UK 4-ply yarn. And I've put the tension and the gauge that I've got in the video that's accompanying this further down the line. If you can't get that gauge, then what you can do is use conversion factors to change the pattern around if you want to. But this is a very simple thing to make, and it will last a very long time.
So I'm going to put the ribber from half pitch across to full pitch. And what that means is that now if I was to bring every needle out on the knitter bed and the ribber bed in line with each other, they would be on a collision course and they would crash and slam into each other, as you can see here. If I just bring a few more out and bring them right opposite, as you can see, they are all colliding and they are now on a collision course. So over 140 needles on the knitter and the ribber bed, I'm going to bring out into holding position on a 1x1 basis. And a 1x1 basis means that you've got one needle in work and one needle out of work, one needle in and one needle out. Now you could do this manually just by bringing every alternate needle out like this, but you can use the needle pusher, which is a 1x1 arrangement. So this is one needle in work and one needle out, one needle in, one needle out. And 140 stitches means 70 needles either side of 0. And now what I'm going to do is bring the alternate needles out on the ribber, and that again is 140 needles, which is 70 either side of the center 0 mark. And as you can see here, this means that you have a ribber needle and a knitting needle that are in the middle of each other, which is what would happen as you've got the ribber bed set to the full pitch facility. So what I'm going to do now is just run the carriages across, and that's going to align all the needles up. And now we're going to cast on. So we're going to cast on with waste yarn, and I happen to think that produces the neatest cast on edge. And to do that, what you do is obviously you have your ribber coupler set up, and it doesn't particularly matter what tensions you've got to cast on with your waste yarn. And so you just drop the yarn through the knitter and the ribber beds and just secure it with a clothes peg or any other form of clip there, and you thread your carriages up. And what you do is you just run along there like that to do your zigzag row, and then you hang your weights and your cast on comb. And I've got that the wrong way round, so let's just put that on properly. And what we're going to do now is just go backwards and forwards and knit a few rows of 1x1 rib. And then we're going to break the yarn and then put that into the break. And what we will do is just take this out of the coupler and then get it down in between the beds of the knitting machine. Then what I'm going to do is take a length of ravel cord and then just manually feed it through the coupler. So what I'm going to do is just drop that through the beds of the knitting machine, and then I'm going to clip that into the clothes peg which we already had hanging down there. And I'm going to put that into the feeder of the carriages there, and now I'm going to set the knitting machine up to do 2 circular rows. So that part lever is going to come up on the right hand side of the ribber carriage, and on the left hand side of the part buttons, that button's going to go in there, and I'm going to do 2 passes. And as you can see here, it's made a circle. I've done 2 circular rows, and this ravel cord is going to come back down through the knitter beds. And what I'm going to do is change to the main yarn, and that's just going to get dropped down, and again it's going to be hooked into the clothes peg at the bottom here, like that, and that's going to go into the ribber coupler. Now what I'm going to do is set this ribber and the knitter to the tightest possible tension, and we cancel out the circular rows, so it's going to do just one zigzag row. I'm now going to set it to do 2 circular rows again. And what I'm going to do now is set the row counter to 0, because what we're going to do is the rib part for the tank top, and we're going to knit the back of the tank top. And I'm going to set this for a tension of 3/3, so that's 3 on the knitter and 3 on the ribber. And what I'm going to do is leave the slide lever on the ribber carriage at setting 2, because I want the rib just to be pulled in slightly. We're going to do the first row quite slowly. So that's row number 1 of the main rib, and I'm going to knit a further 24 rows. So in total, that's 25 rows of rib. I've stopped at row 24 because what I'm going to do is loosen the tension by 1 number. So I'm going to go up by 1 whole number on the knitter and the ribber, and that will help the transfer of the stitches from the ribber to the knitter greatly. So to transfer the stitches up, what I'm going to do is go from full pitch to half pitch on the ribber, and as you saw that the ribber moved halfway across there, I'm going to bring all the empty needles up into work position on the knitted bed, and I'm going to go all the way along, but I'm also going to bring probably about an extra 4 needles into work here on the right hand side, 3 or 4 needles. I'm going to take the transfer carriage, put that, let's just move these across there a bit more, put that in its place and hold it down firmly like that, making sure that this lower edge, this button here, is down where it should be, right in the lower setting, and I'm going to go across gently but firmly. And that has transferred all of these ribber stitches up to the knitter, and what you do is you just move all these down, and yes, every single stitch has been transferred up, and just move those back into place. Sometimes it will miss the odd one, but this has actually caught every single stitch here. What I'm going to do is just move this down so we can double check, and yes, every single ribber stitch has gone up onto the knitter. Now what I'm going to do is take the cast on comb and the weights off, and we'll just put some claw weights in. So the main sinker plate is in situ, the carriage has been threaded up correctly, and the main garment tension has been set onto the knitting machine carriage. I've set the row counter to 0, and now we're going to knit up to the armhole shaping, which is row 132. I'm going to do the first row slowly, and as you can see, I've managed to get a loop of yarn caught round the end bolt there, but that doesn't matter. We can actually work that into the seam later, and away we go. We just knit up to row 132, and every few rows, every 20 rows, every 25 rows or so, you need to move your claw weights up, making sure that you will leave enough space for the mechanisms of the sinker plate to pass through. I can't stress the importance of that enough. Although it might seem tempting just to continually merrily knitting away, you will come into problems if you don't move your weights up on a regular basis. The edge stitches will slip, you'll get knots, you will get loops at the edge of your work. It really isn't worth it. If you want to make something that looks nice and you want to actually have some trouble-free knitting on your machine, then just move the weights up. It takes literally seconds. So that's row 132. I'm just going to move these weights up again. And now what I'm going to do is reset the row counter to 0. And I'm going to cast off 6 stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows. So I'm going to take the yarn out of the sinker plate, and I'm going to do this around the gate pegs. Now, if you don't know how to do this, it's quite an easy thing to do. You just bring the first stitch out, take it around the back of the gate pegs, put it on to the next stitch, take the yarn, put it in the hook, and then pull it back. Then do the same thing, take that stitch off, bring it around the back of the gate peg, put it onto the next needle, take the yarn, lay it in the hook and bring it back, and then you take that next stitch, bring it around the back of the gate peg, put it onto that needle there, lay the yarn in the hook and bring it back. And you do that for 6 stitches. And then we're going to rethread the carriage, knit 1 row. I've made that loop again there. I keep doing that lately, I don't know why. There's nothing wrong with the machine, it's me. But again, we will just sew that into the seam. But these stitches that you cast off, you must lift this off the gate pegs there, because if you don't, then the knitting won't fall down off the gate pegs and then it will get bunched up. So that's fine there. And then what we're going to do is just put the claw weight right on the edge there, so the knitting will actually move down properly. And then we're going to go to the other end and then cast off 6 stitches that end as well. There we are, that's 6 stitches cast off there. And then what I'm going to do is knit 1 row. We'll remove this from the gate pegs there. And then what I'm going to do now is decrease 1 stitch at each end of the knitting until we get down to 95 stitches. And that should take us up to row 20 on the row counter. So that's 1 stitch there. And this is just the simple decrease method, because this is what actually makes the underarm curve. If I was actually going and making a full curve, then I might want to consider doing a fully fashioned decrease. But this is a narrow curve, so I'm not going to bother in this case. So that's 1 stitch, knit 1 row, and another stitch at each end. And we will knit another row, another stitch each end, and we knit another row. And as I said, we keep doing this until we get down to 95 stitches, and that should take us up to row counter 20. And there we are, that's row counter 20, and I have 95 stitches left on the machine. And so what I'm going to do now is knit up to row 100, and then we're going to shape the back neck and the shoulders. There we are, that's row 100. So in order to shape the back neck, we first need to know how many stitches are on each shoulder. And for this particular size, it's 29 stitches on each shoulder. So therefore, whatever's left in the middle is for the back neck. And we're going to isolate, or rather mark, the edge stitch for each back neck. So therefore, on these edge stitches here, what I'm going to do is just put a yarn marker. So what I've done, just to recap, is I've marked the outside stitches of the center 37 stitches of the neck, and I've marked the middle point of the neckband there. So in order to shape the back neck, we're going to take the center stitches for the back onto waste yarn, but we're not going to take them all onto waste yarn, because instead of having a box-shaped back neck, we're going to have a nice curve to go up to the shoulders. So in order to do that, we're going to leave a few of the outside stitches here onto the knitting machine, because as we shape the shoulders here, we're going to decrease on the neck edge as well. So I'm going to leave 4 of these stitches either side into work. So although there's 37 stitches here, I'm going to leave 4 in work either side of the outside markers here. So let's leave these in. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. These can stay into work, and all of these stitches here are going to be taken off onto waste yarn. So these ones are going to stay into work, and these stitches here will be put onto waste yarn, and they will be fed back onto the machine when we hang the neckband. And the way to actually put these onto waste yarn is the other shoulder stitches will move out into hold, and we'll just knit across here with about 10 rows or so of waste yarn. And when you're taking waste yarn off into the middle of a piece of knitting, always take it over the held stitches like that, otherwise it will fall off the machine. And reduce your tension by 2 numbers. It makes the life stitches much easier to pick up. Go across slowly for the first row. And then, as I say, we're just going to do roughly 10 rows or so. We can break that off and then rethread the carriage up with the main yarn. Now I'm just going to move all these stitches back into work that we put in for the shoulder. So the shoulder stitches are back in line here, and I've left the center stitches in the hold position because I don't want it to drag down too much. And what I'm going to do is just do the first of the neck decreases. So that goes over to the right there like that. And I'm now going to put the tension back to garment tension and go across 1 row. And now what I'm going to do is decrease 15 stitches on the shoulder. And go back 1. And at the same time, do another decrease at the neck edge. And wrap the yarn to make sure that we don't get a hole forming. Do another decrease at the neck edge, making sure that you don't leave it in hold because otherwise it won't knit. Go across 1, and then do another one at the neck edge, and then and then 13 stitches at that edge. Do a wrap, and then what I'm going to do is just go across once, and then I'm going to move these stitches back until they're just behind the latch, so that's forward working position, and I'm going to go across once that way just to knit all those wraps off. And that's knitted everything off, and as you can see there, we've got our nice curve. And then I'm going to take this off onto waste yarn, and again move these stitches forward so it's supported by the machine. And these stitches over here I'm going to leave in hold at the minute because I'm just going to make a free pass with the carriage. It's still in hold, so I want the carriage over to the left hand side of the machine. So now we're going to repeat the process. So what I'm going to do is all these stitches that are on the left hand side, barring the ones that we put into hold for the center, I'm going to put those just behind the latches there. So that's several rows of waste yarn done there. We're just going to unthread the carriage. We'll take off these weights that are left there. We'll take the carriage off of hold, and then we'll just go right across, and that's everything come off the machine there. And as you can see, here is the back neck shaping. Here is the back neck. There's the nice curve that you've got from both edges there. And here is the shoulder slope.
Now I'm going to show you how to deal with the bottom edge of the rib that we use with this waste yarn. So you go to the edge that is actually closed off, you take your hook and you just pop it into the edge of where the ravel cord is. It's quite easily seen there, and then you just literally get the edge and then you pull it. I find it easier to pull one edge at a time rather than both. So just pull one edge out like that. So that's one edge of the ravel cord out, and now we'll just pull the other part, and the waste knitting falls away, and there is your really neat ribbing edge there. As you can see, it's flawlessly flat. There's no rippling that you sometimes get with ribs that you do, and it's perfectly straight and it's very smooth indeed. I happen to prefer this particular method over any other of doing a rib cast on. So we're doing the front part of the tank top now, and so far it's exactly the same as the back. So what I've done is I've done the rib, I've decreased the armhole stitches, and we're right up to row counter 20. I'm now going to knit to row count 32. And row count 32 is where we're going to start the decreasing for the V-neck. And what I've done here is I've made 32, row count 32 is a third between the armhole edges and the top of where the shoulder point is. So between the armhole and the shoulder is 100 rows, give or take 1 or 2 rows either side. And what I did is I divided that into 3, and the first third was at row counter 32. So what I'm going to do now is put a yarn marker at that point, at the 0 point. Oops, I've just switched my light off. So let's switch that back on. And at the center point, I'm just going to put a marker here. And we'll just tie that off. And you need that because that's obviously where your mitre point will be. So what I'm going to do now is to put all the stitches to the left of 0 in hold. Whoops. And I'm going to put the carriage into hold. And then what I'm going to do is go across and knit 2 rows. And I'm going to make a fully fashioned decrease. And so there's many videos out there that show you how to do a fully fashioned decrease. And what I'm going to do is just bring that across and make sure that you don't put those needles out into hold, because otherwise it won't knit. And then knit another 2 rows. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. And make sure that that needle is out of work, and you must put a weight on the edge there, otherwise the stitches might not properly knit off. Into another 2 rows. I'm going to do another decrease, move it across. Now you don't have to do a fully fashioned decrease at the neck edge, you can just do a simple decrease if you want to. I prefer the fully fashioned decrease because I think it looks the nicest. And we're going to do that until we get down to 29 stitches. So there we are, that's the last of the decreases. We decreased 1 stitch every 2 rows 18 times. And now we're going to knit up to row 100. And what I'm going to do is just put a weight at the other end there. And then we're just going to continue knitting. So now we're going to do some shoulder shaping, but we need the carriage to be on the other side. Now, it doesn't make any difference if we're going to do just 1 more row. It doesn't make any difference in the grand scheme of things. So we're just going to move the carriage across by 1 row. and we're going to put the carriage into hold. Well, the carriage is already into hold, so that doesn't make any difference there. So again, the same as the back, 15 stitches. Go across, and then again back, then across and back, and then what we're going to do is just move all of those stitches just behind the latches and do one final row, and that's knitted those off. So what we're going to do now is take those off onto waste yarn. We'll break that, take them off onto waste yarn and do the other side. So that's the first side done. What we're going to do is put these stitches in hold and then make a pass of the carriage. And we're going to move these stitches back up to the position that is just upper working position there. And then we will thread up with the main yarn. And what we're going to do is reset the tension on the carriage there, and again make 2 passes across. And it's the same thing. So we're going to decrease 1 stitch every 2 rows 18 times using the fully fashioned method. One thing that I didn't actually say is that you must remember to reset your row counter to row 32 when you restart the other side of your tank top. If you don't, then you really will get into some trouble when it comes to remembering whereabouts you are with your rows. And always make sure that your carriage goes past the row counter tripper, as I just didn't there and I had to advance the counter manually. So make sure that your carriage goes right past it. So that's the second shoulder complete, and I've unthreaded the carriage. I'm taking off the weights. We'll take the carriage off of hold and we'll just go across to take everything off the machine. And there we go. As you can see, that is now the V-neck part of the tank top complete, and we're just going to join the front onto the back. So we're going to use the knitting machine to graft these shoulder seams together. You could use a linking machine if you wanted to. Mine's still in the box because it's only just come back from repair. And what we're going to do is just pick up the live stitches and we're going to hook them back onto the machine, and it's obviously right sized together, and it's really simple to do that. So the reason why it's very simple is because if you just pull a little bit slightly to the left or to the right if you're left-handed, the stitches will separate out very, very easily. And the reason why it will do that is because we did the waste yarn at a slightly tighter tension. So this waste yarn was done at tension 5 and the main yarn was knitted at number 7, and that's why it's so easy to pick them up. And now we're going to put one of the back shoulders on, and obviously you need to match up the armhole side to the shoulder point there, and it's right sized together as I said. I'm going to put a claw weight here just to stop these stitches from jumping out of the needles. It will help a great deal. Just put that there, and then we'll carry on and just hook these stitches on. It takes just a matter of moments. It really doesn't take long at all. There we are. I'm just going to pop another weight onto that edge there. Make sure that all these stitches are back, and just before you do anything else, double check that every needle has got a stitch onto it, and yes we have. I'm going to just remove the waste yarn from one of these shoulders. Now really don't be alarmed at doing that. As long as you've got a stitch, every stitch on every needle, there is no possibility of any harm coming to your knitting at all. The stitches won't run, and it does make a big difference
to how smoothly these stitches will knit across. And we're going to thread the carriage up, and 3 tensions higher than garment tension, so this is number 10 now. We're going to make 2 passes with the carriage. I'm going to break the yarn, and what I'm going to do now is take these weights off. And take a latch tool and then just do a latch tool bind off. Now, I've already demonstrated how to do a latch tool bind off. I prefer to do it this method rather than pulling it through on all the needles into hold position. This way of doing it is actually, in my opinion, the safest way. You could bind off around the gate pegs if you wanted to, but in my opinion, that gives a firmer edge. This edge, or this way rather, is much quicker, and it's also a lot more stretchier than going around the gate pegs. But others may disagree, and that may be the way that you prefer, and you might want to consider doing it the way that suits you best. There we are, that's the shoulder done, and just turn it the right way round, and we'll get rid of the other part of the waist yarn. There we are, and as you can see, that is a beautifully grafted shoulder there. Obviously it's quite conspicuous at the moment because we haven't put any steam onto it whatsoever, but that is how we do it, and as you saw, it's made in moments. So along the shoulder seam here at the armhole edge, as you can see, there's quite a lot of loose ends of yarn, so I'm going to just tidy these off, and we're just going to tie them together, and then what we'll do is we'll just snip them off. You could leave it till later if you wanted to, but I just like to get them out of the way. And what I'm going to do is you just find whatever's nearest and you pull them so that they actually join this edge of the shoulder there. And just tie that one. I usually do 2 knots, and then on the other side as well. And what I'm going to do is just shorten these lengths of yarn, so probably about 10 centimeters or so. And now we need to make the armbands. So what we're going to do is put the shoulder seam at the center 0 mark, and we're just going to offer up to the machine 1/2 of the armhole. So don't put too much stretch onto it. You don't need that much. Just make sure it sits comfortably on the machine, and you go across, making sure that the edge is fairly straight. And as you can see, this half comes to 85 stitches there. So in total, I need 170 stitches to make this armband. And obviously we need 2 armbands, so I'm going to do a 1x1 rib of 170 stitches. So again, using the waste yarn cast on method, I have cast on in a 1x1 setting, as I've discussed earlier. I've done the 2 circular rows in the main yarn, and I've set the carriage up to knit in a 1x1 setting now. But what I've done is I've reduced the tension slightly for this, and I've got the carriage on a 2/2 setting rather than the 3/3 for the main welts. And what I'm going to do is just knit 12 rows of ribbing. But just as before, what I've done is I've stopped at row 11 because I'm going to increase slightly up by 1 number. So that's loosened the tension, and I'm going to make 1 pass across. And that just makes the transfer a little bit easier. And again, we're going to put the ribber into 1/2 pitch and move all these empty needles up, plus a few extra on the right hand side there, and making sure that this button is down with the transfer carriage. We're going to go across gently but swiftly. And that has transferred all of the stitches, and we'll now just move them down. I'm now going to change from the ribber coupler over to the sinker plate.
I'm now at main garment tension with the main carriage, and I'm going to make one pass across. And then what I'm going to do is take off the ribber weights and the ribber comb. So now, with the wrong side facing me, I'm going to hang the armhole edge back onto these stitches here, and it's of course the very edge that we're going to be taking, and we're going to hang this very evenly. So starting at 0, we're going to just ease this back onto the knitting machine, and these ends that you can see here we'll deal with later. And as you hang the edges of these armholes on, you really must try not to stretch it. And as you hang it up, make sure that you're hanging this as evenly as you possibly can. And of course, always when you are hanging these edges, make sure that you take just the very edge stitch. You don't want to be taking too much. Now, to see to these loose ends of yarn here, what we're going to do is just weave them over and under the empty needles. Now, this is something that I only do to the edge seams. If I've actually got some stripes and I'm doing horizontal stripes, I wouldn't tend to use this particular method to weave in the loose ends. Where stripes are concerned, going horizontally, I think that that's a bit too precarious, but I do this for weaving in the ends where I'm sewing in a seam for something like this, for instance. That's absolutely fine, but as I say, not for where you're securing stripes, horizontal stripes where the color changes seem to happen. So we'll just get on with that, and then we'll do all of these loose ends here. And now we're going to take the expired credit card and we're going to close all of these latches. Now that's really quite an important thing to do, because this is an extra thick and bulky seam there, and this means that the machine has the least work to do. We've already got these needles out to holding position, which means the workload on the carriage is already reduced. And to make it even easier, to give it the least work to do possible, we'll just close all these latches. And now we will just go across with the carriage 2 passes at the loosest tension, so tension 10. And now we'll break the yarn, and then we'll just take a latch tool and then we will cast off. So again, just as before, we're casting off in exactly the same way as we did when we did the shoulder grafting. It's absolutely no different at all, and the reason why we do it is absolutely no different at all, and we will have a look at the end result shortly. So that's done there, and what we're going to do now is just put all these needles back, and we'll take the scissors and just cut those loose ends off that we wove in. And they're quite secure, so we don't need to worry about that. And now we're going to remove this waste yarn in the way that I showed you how to do it with the hook. So we'll just get the hook and then just pull it a little bit so we've got one end free. And then just pull one at a time, don't pull both, just one at a time. And then the other end. Then the waste will fall away. And then, as you can see, that is a beautifully attached rib edging band there. And what we'll do later is obviously apply some steam to that, and then we'll put it into shape. But that is how you apply an armband or a neckband or any type of band when you've got a rib and you don't want to use the linking machine. So now we're going to have a look at doing the neckband, and the way that I work this out is again very much similar to the armband. Is I go from the center back right the way down to the mitre point on the front neck, and I offer this up to the machine.
Now there are ways of working out stitch by stitch and row by row the exact number of stitches you need, but this method has never let me down. It's always worked very well for me, and it will be a way that I continue to do that. So you go from where you have put your center mark here at the back neck. This is the back neck here, and we're just going to hook the live stitches on from the center. So we're only going to just put a few on, so starting at 0 at the middle of the back neck, just so we can get an accurate amount for the stitches for the back neck there. We're going to hook those on, and also what we're going to do is just put onto the machine the curved part of the back neck there. So just where this curve is, we're going to put that on to the machine as well. You don't have to be too accurate about going right into the very edge at this point. This is just to get an estimation of how many stitches we need, because this is going to come off later. And again, all the way down, just at various points. You don't need to put every single part of the edge band on. So this has come out at 85 stitches on the right hand side of 0, but we need a few extra stitches just so we can actually sew the miter part there. And what I'm going to do is actually add on probably about an extra 4 stitches. So we'll take this up to, well, actually no, we'll take it up to 90. So just to make it even, we'll take it up to 90. So that's 180 stitches we need in total for this neckband. The neckband, and what I've done is I've already done the waste yarn cast on, as we've done before with the armbands and with the main rib welts, and that's over 180 needles, and I've cast on and I've done the zigzag row and the 2 circular rows in main yarn. I've got the carriages set at tension 2, and I'm going to do 3 rows. And I'm now going to reduce the tension, so making it slightly tighter. I've reduced it by 1 dot. I'm going to do another 3 rows. And I'm going to do another 3 rows by reducing it by a further 1 dot. And then the final 3 rows, which makes the 12 rows, again by reducing it by a further dot. So I've gone down by 1 whole number, and what that will do is it will actually make the rib slightly tighter as it graduates up. And the reason why I want to do that is to ensure that the band will lay flat against the person's chest as they go to wear this particular garment. So now what I'm going to do is get the stitches from the knitted bed, from the ribber bed, sorry, up to the knitter. So that's the neckband complete now, and I've transferred all the stitches from the ribber up to the knitter, and I've gone across with the main sinker plate in situ at garment tension, which is number 7, and I've done 1 row of stockinette stitch. So both shoulders are joined on the tank top, and we're going to join this in 2 halves. So what we're going to do is the marker that we put at the centre back neck, we're going to hang the stitch at the centre back on the centre 0, and we're going to go right the way down the side neck of the front part of the garment, all the way down to the centre marker at the miter point there. But remember that we left 4 stitches out, that's so we can sew the miter point up when we finish the neckband. So all the way down, and we're going to start at the end here. And it's always easier to go from the, if you're right-handed, to go from right to left when you're hanging anything back onto the knitted bed. So starting 4 stitches in, we're just going to put that bit on to the knitting machine bed there, and we're not going to apply any stretch to this, and we're going to just take the outer edge of the neckband edge there. And remember that this is a fully fashioned decrease, so we really do want just the outer edge to pick up, because otherwise it will really ruin the appearance of the outer edge. Just before we carry on there, what I'm going to do is just go up and put the center neckband stitch there, the center zero stitch, onto the center zero of the knitting bed, just so we know where we are and we know how much we've got to play with there. So I'm going to do that because at half of the neckband at the back are live stitches, so that's an exact amount, whereas here we're going to be easing it in. So we're going to be putting that on and just hang the rest of the live stitches on. Like that. And we're now coming up to the curved part of the band. Just got another couple of stitches to go here. And now, once we've got past the curved part there, we can continue down from this side. And we do it that way just because we need to know how much we need to ease in. And again, making sure that we're only catching the very edge of the stitches where we decreased for the neckband. And there we are, that's the last stitch there. And what I'm going to do is just move all of that back against the gate pegs and just put these back into upper working position, or forward working position rather. And I'm going to do that because what I'm going to do is put the other half of the stitches into holding position. And we'll just move these forward now, because I don't want these to knit at all. So the carriage is going to go into hold, and we'll put the tension up to tension 10. And what I'm going to do, as usual, is to knit 2 passes across. And we'll take the latch tool and cast this half off. We'll just break the yarn before we do that, just to make it a bit easier. And remember that although we cast on, we joined the mitre point up to 4 stitches at the end, we've actually knitted right off down to the very edge here of the neckband, and we're going to cast off right to that very edge there with the latch tool. And we need to do that because we won't be able to stretch this part of the garment round in order to put it onto that side. So we just take the latch tool and cast off just as we did before. It might be a little bit difficult just to do the first few stitches because there's nothing to lever off there, but once you've got going, it's pretty plain sailing really. So we'll just continue with that now. And here we are, that's 1/2 of the band done. And so what we're going to do now is just put the other half of the band on that way round. And there we are, that's 1/2 of the band done. I'm just going to move these stitches out of the way, these needles out of the way. And so what we're going to do now is to put this half of the neckband on, and it's just literally, so we're starting at this half of the back neck, and we're going to put the stitches onto the needles here. We'll just move these needles back up a little bit just to make it slightly easier. Back up to forward working position, and so starting at the center of the back neck, and just as we did with the first side, we're going to go all the way round down to the end there, minus the last 4 stitches. And then just as before, we just carry on going down, spacing this out evenly. So that's that. We're just going to move this back up against the needle bed, just as we previously did. And we'll thread the carriage up, and leaving it at the loosest tension, we're going to make 2 passes. Oops. Just take that off of hold. We're going to make 2 passes. And cast off just as we previously did. So that's that. That's the neckband on completely.
And what we're going to do now is just remove the waste yarn. And if you're wondering why there's two stripes of waste yarn, it's because as I initially did the first row of main rib, I made a mistake. So instead of actually undoing everything, I'll just put in an extra row of waste yarn and then did the main rib. So that's the neckband in place. What I'm going to do is just take off the waste yarn at the back and remove the stitch markers. So that's all the stitch markers out. What's left to do now is to put the remaining armband on, and then we'll give that a bit of steam. So both the armbands are on now and the neckband is on, as you've just seen, and we're at the ironing board. And what I've done is I've put the band over a tailor's ham here, and this just allows you to maintain the curved areas of the garment instead of having it flat out. And as you can do that, you can apply steam at the same time, and you will keep the curvature going instead of having it flat out. So we're just going to apply steam just as I showed you to do in the video that I've already uploaded, applying your steam to your knitted garments. Don't apply too much because you will kill the yarn, so just a little bit, and then we will take that off and just pat it into place, and then we'll move it across, go to the next section and apply more steam. I'm using the steaming wand here. You can use an iron, of course, if you want to. Pay particular attention if you're using a steam generator iron, as I've mentioned in the previous video, because they can be a little bit powerful. And just keep it going round and mould it to the shape of the ham. If you don't have a tailor's ham, then you can just use some rolled up towels, but try not to have the garment flat on the board if you're applying steam to curved areas, particularly around armbands and the back necks if you have a shaped back neck. And you just keep going round until you get to the other side. So there we are, that's nicely steamed into place now, and what we're going to do is do the other armband, which I won't show on camera because there's no point, it's exactly the same, and then we'll come back and then we'll do this neckband here. And while I'm here, I'm just going to apply some steam to each shoulder seam that we've grafted on the knitting machine, so just backwards and forwards, and then we'll just pat that into shape. And there we go, we'll just do the other one now, and that's that one done. If you hear any strange noises coming from outside, the dustmen have just come to empty the bins from outside, so, and they're making a bit of a racket, so there we go. Right, so now we're going to steam the neckband. So we're starting at the mitre point here, and what we're going to do again was we're going to do this on the tailor's ham, and we're just going to go round in sections. So we'll start at the bottom. And as I said before, just keep the steaming wand probably about 10 to 15 centimetres above the garment, and just backwards and forwards. And then after that, just gently pat the steam into the neck edge there. And as you can see already, it's vastly improving its appearance. And then we'll just go round, and then keeping the curved shape from the back neck, we'll just do that section there. Again, pat the steam in, and we'll just go around and complete the remaining sides. So that's that done, and now the only thing left to do is to close this section up here. So in order to see to the mitre point, it's quite a simple thing. You ensure that you have this neckband on the inside, and that this edge here, where you joined it to the main garment, is aligned precisely with the other side. And what you do is you thread a ballpoint needle up. This is a ballpoint needle, and sometimes referred to as a darning needle. Thread it up with the main yarn, and you insert the point of the needle precisely at the mitre point where it starts there. And then what you do is, having aligned these two edges up, where the mitre point starts, you're going to sew some back stitches in an exact line from here right to the very edge of where the neckband is. Now you don't need to pull these stitches tight, they just need to be fairly loose, and you need to make them probably about 5mm wide. So just keep them fairly snug, not too tight, because it will distort the band from the outside, and it really won't take long. So about 5mm apart, and you go all the way to the top of the band like that, and you might need probably about, in a 1-inch band, you probably need about 7 or 8 stitches perhaps, and make sure that the top edge of the band is aligned, of course, and then you go to the back and you just secure off. And I'm just going to fasten this off now, and then I'll show you what it looks like from the outside. And here we are, this is the mitered point, and as you can see it's a perfect match. All that's left now is to join the side seams. So we're at the linking machine now, and I've hung one side seam onto the linker pins here, and as I said in a previous clip, this machine went back to the manufacturer for repair, and I've only just taken it out of the box. And you can actually link the bands on, the neck bands and the armbands, via the linking machine, and I would normally do that because it's actually a lot quicker, but as I said earlier on, I just couldn't be bothered to take it out of the box, and not everybody has a linking machine, and so it was a good idea to show it how to put the bands on using the knitting machine. So you've got to see both ways of doing it. So what I'm going to do now is just completely finish putting this side seam onto the linker pins, and then we'll get this seam finished off. So that's the entire side seam onto this. What I'm going to do now is just bring this round to meet the needles. Just one more click there. Well, hold on to the threads, and I've woven the loose ends in there. And what I'm going to do is just go all the way round. I have actually no idea if this is in working order. I hope so, because the manufacturers assured me it was all ready to go. So off we go. As you can see, it's got stuck. So after that disaster with the linking machine, I have very quickly put it back in its box, ready to go back to the manufacturer for yet another repair. And I've just put the side seams back onto the knitting machine, and I'm joining it in the usual way. And as you can see, I'm just casting off with the latch tool in the normal fashion, as we've been doing since the start of this project. So both side seams have been joined. I'm just going to apply some steam just to smooth them out a bit, and it's the same principles as what we did when we steamed the bands. As you can see, I'm holding the steaming wand literally about 15 centimeters above the actual garment itself, and using wide sweeping movements, we're just going to go backwards and forwards just to give it a gentle steam. Don't spend too long in one spot like that, because otherwise you will kill the yarn, make no bones about it. And again, if you're using a steam iron or a steam generating iron, then you would use the steam in short, sharp bursts, just as I showed you when I've put the video online already called Steaming Your Knitwear. And I've put the link in the description below there. And as you can see, it's much flatter and much neater. And I'm just going to do the other seam, and there we are. That's the other seam now finished, and the tank top is completely made now. All that's left is for this to be laundered in the exact same way as the gauge swatch was done, in accordance with the yarn instructions. And here we are, everything has been washed and dried in accordance with the yarn instructions and with the gauge swatch that was made before I made this garment. Now, as you can see, the bands are on, the armbands here and the neckband, and this is the edge of the fully fashioned decreases that we did when we was decreasing the two front sides. Now, as I said in the pattern in the video that I did, this neckband was put 1/3 of the way up, and that was because what I did is I divided the amount of rows at the start of the armhole to where the shoulder is. I divided it into 3, and I went 1/3 up of that number. If If you want a slightly lower one, then what you could do is divide between the armhole and the top of the shoulder into 4. So say for instance, if your amount of rows between the armhole and the shoulder is 100, you would then just divide that into 4, which obviously goes 25, and you would start your neck decreases at row 25, but then you would need to work out how many decreases you would need to do. And that's quite an easy thing to do if you use conversion factors. There are videos that are online that show you how to do that. If you actually want a very traditional neckline, then what you would do is you would start your decreases at the same time as you did your armhole. That is a little bit precarious because you have to take into account the amount of decreases you're doing for the armhole and the neckline at the same time. Now I'm going to turn this around, and what I can do is just show you here the beautifully curved back neck that we achieved just doing the simple decreases. Now I showed in the video doing that without using holding method. You can use holding method if you want to. Holding method is a very useful way of doing it. I didn't show that method because I wanted to show you how to do it without holding method. The holding method is something I would normally use if I was doing a round neckline, but some people are a little bit afraid of it. I chose to show that in the video, but in the pattern instructions, what I did is I have explained how to use the holding method to shape the back neck. But anyway, this is a man's tank top and it's a classic design. It never ever goes out of fashion and it will stay in vogue for many years to come.